So every part of the home building process is very important. However, one of the most misunderstood and one of the most confusing is the framing. So what we're standing in now is a house that is in frame. Now, just a word about safety. You'll notice I'm wearing a hard hat. Anytime that there's the potential that anything could fall from above, you should have a hard hat when you're walking in a property. So let's talk about framing. Framing is the bones of the house. You know, if you were thinking of the human body, the bones are the things that kind of create the support. Framing of a house can be very simple, or framing can be very, very complex. Each stage of the way, it gets more complex as you move up in complexity of design. Now, this particular house that we're standing in is kind of medium in complexity, so we'll be able to get a lot of the information from right here. But the best place that we can start is the universal pieces that go into building a home. So this video is all about the pieces of the framing. So everything starts with the foundation. That's this concrete that's poured here. Might be block, either one is just fine. So everything has to attach from this foundation to hold the rest of the house in place. Important first step is this little piece of foam right here. This piece of foam is called a sill seal. It will be the barrier between the concrete foundation and the wood that's on top of it. So from the foundation to the sill seal we just talked about, now you have the sill plate. That's this piece of wood that is attached to the foundation. That is attached with an anchor bolt. That's this little bolt right here that is drilled into the foundation, comes up through and attaches right here. Then on top of that, generic term is stud. So that is this piece of wood that goes vertical and supports loads above it. Up above me and below me are things called joists. So these joists carry the load of the floor on both the upper levels and the lower level of the house. Now those can be different materials. So that could be, in the case of this house, it could be an engineered floor joist. Has a top plate, bottom plate, and then a piece of engineered lumber in between. It could be a piece of dimensional lumber. That's what this is called. This is just a regular board. Dimensional lumber, when it's stood up like this, can support a big heavy load. Now another option is in between the two of these, and we'll insert a picture here, but in between is a fully engineered floor joist system. Now that comes in two forms. It could be a piece of lumber that's all compressed together, or it could be a floor truss. Floor trusses, will also insert a picture of that here as well. So in the last segment I was talking about the different materials, and that you could actually have a floor truss that goes as a floor joist. We just happened to leave that site. We passed this and I said, you know what, we'll get a shot of this. So here is a floor truss. You got a bottom plate of it, top plate of it, and then these are engineered. Now this gives a little bit of give, plus in addition to that it makes it really easy for them to put the mechanicals and things through these openings as they're putting everything together later on in the house. So the floor joist, standing on end, very strong. However, it can tip over if it's not attached to something. What it's attached to is called a rim board. That's what this is right here. It can attach either directly or it can attach via some fasteners that are specially made to hold these in place. So here's an example of that hardware I was talking about. This is just a joist hanger. There's all kinds of different variations of it, but this is just an example of what one of those looks like. Another piece to the puzzle is girders and beams. So here in central Ohio where I'm shooting this, most of the girders in the houses are steel I-beams. And we'll insert a picture of a steel I-beam here. Also, you've got beams. Now beams can be dimensional lumber sandwiched together, or they can be engineered beams, such as what this beam is right here. So this is supporting the weight here that carries up to the roof. So another term to define is a post and a column. So a post is a standalone piece that will hold what's above it. Now that can be lumber, it can be steel, but basically, unlike a stud, which we'll cover in a minute, these posts stand alone to hold the weight that's above it. In this particular case, it's a 4x4 that's holding the roof that's over this porch. So what I'm standing on here, this is the subfloor. The subfloor goes on top of the flooring joist. Now, this material is specially engineered to support the weight and to be squeak free. So, I've propped up a piece of this material here. This happens to be a piece of 4x8 engineered, and it has a tongue on this end, then it has a groove on this end so that they come together like a big finger. This then is put on top, it is glued, nailed, screwed, every possible way to reduce the amount of squeak. We've all walked in an old house that squeaked. Well, that typically is the subfloor that's squeaking. So really, really important is make sure that your contractor glues down that subfloor. So on top of the subfloor goes another type of plate. This is a bottom plate. We talked about the sill plate that goes on top of the foundation. Now on top of the subfloor goes a bottom plate. The bottom plate attaches to studs. Yes, endless source of amusement there. And then on top, there's a top plate that's just like this. Now that material could be a 2x6 stud, like this, which is what this is. Sometimes it's a 2x4. Now, let's walk through it one more time just to make sure that we've got it straight. So we've got a sill plate on the bottom. We've got a floor joist that goes on top of that sill plate. The band board ties them all together, okay? Then the subfloor goes down. Then the bottom plate, top plate goes on top, and then the studs. Now there's all kinds of different types of studs in a house. So the types of studs, it can be really confusing. So we're going to try to walk through this, give you a good idea of what each part is and how it relates to the structure of the house. So this is a traditional stud. This goes from the bottom plate to the top plate, and in this particular case, it's what the sheathing attaches to. Drywall attaches on the other side. Now let's walk over here to this doorway, and we have some interesting things here. So number one, whenever you get a grouping of studs put together, this is called a stud pack. That's just a grouping of studs that are put together to provide additional strength for up above. Now, this piece, well, these three pieces together form what's called a jack stud. That jack stud goes on the outside of this door opening, going from the bottom plate to the top plate. Now to hold up the header, we have another stud pack. This is a really well-built house. Another stud pack that is supporting from the bottom plate to the header. Then above the header are cripples, which is just for attaching drywall. That doesn't support anything above it. It just is there as an attachment point for the drywall that's going to go on top of it. So windows and doors are framed in a special way. Now the door that we just came from, that is going to be an opening that's not going to have an actual physical door. But anytime that you have windows or you have a door going in, the weight can't sit on those windows. So therefore there's special framing that takes place, and we'll kind of walk through it here. So this is the sill plate for this window. This is where your window sill will come out. Below that are studs that support that sill. Okay? We talked about the jack stud supporting the header. That header up top transfers the weight from above out to these outer studs. Therefore, there's no weight on the window that's going to crack the window. Okay? Then above it, again, another set of cripples just for drywall to attach to. So let's go through it really well, because this is so important when you're doing your walkthrough on your house to make sure that you understand. So window sill attaches to cripples below. Jack studs support the header. King studs hold those jack studs in place. Then above it is a header that transfers that weight from above out to the jack studs and down to the foundation. Really, really crucial that you don't get weight coming down on top of a window. Now doors, different story. Exact same framing mechanism, but you don't have this. It goes obviously all the way to the floor so you can walk through. Okay, so obviously every piece of framing is important. But if you want to know the personal pet peeve of Rich in framing, it's going to be about blocking. So what is blocking? Blocking can be described basically as pieces of the frame where other things attach to it that aren't necessarily part of the structure itself. So, like here in the corner, there's going to be drywall that comes in from this side and drywall that comes in from this side. Easy to attach to the stud, but there's nothing on the other side to attach that drywall to, so they put blocking in. This is just called vertical corner blocking. Now you may see a piece like this that is inserted between the studs. Let's say you were putting in kitchen cabinets. The kitchen cabinets would attach to this blocking. You don't want it basically floating out there. Now, one of the real important areas that is a big pet peeve of mine is up here at the top, they will put blocking between these two studs so that when people put their window treatments in, they're actually screwing into something. If you get elaborate window treatments, they're very heavy. And if they're just attaching into drywall, they're going to fall down. So blocking, very, very important. I could do a whole video just on blocking. Now let's talk about staircases. Now this video won't go into all the intricate details of staircases, but let's just suffice it to say that staircases are obviously important. You don't want to fall down them, you don't want to fall up them, and you certainly don't want the staircase falling down. So let's talk about the parts of it. So this part that goes along the edge that's notched out, that creates the actual staircase effect, that's called a stringer. The top here is called the tread. This is what you would walk on. This particular staircase is going to have hardwood treads, so that's why it's framed up this way. The board that's going to go in front, that's called the riser. The riser is just that kick plate that, so let's say that a foot was coming in, it doesn't go through the staircase. So it's important to note that staircases can be built from scratch like the one behind me, or they can come pre-engineered, pre-manufactured from a manufacturer and delivered with all the parts already put together. Neither one has a particular benefit, just the manufactured are a little bit less expensive obviously than having a carpenter come in and build these from scratch. So once the walls are framed up, once the sheathing is on the outside of the house, once the studs are all in place, the jack studs are in place, all the pieces, parts, everything else, then they come in and they put on the roof. That starts with a truss. So that's what's directly above me is a truss. Now this particular house is built incredibly strong. And this truss system is all engineered to create a rather complex roof line on this particular house. So how do those stay attached to the house itself? So okay, here's that picture of the top plate that I've referred to earlier. That attaches via this little special piece of hardware, sometimes called a hurricane clip. Okay, on top of these trusses, once they get set in place, then the roof deck will go on. The roof deck is a piece of engineered lumber, or it is a piece of plywood that goes on top of that roof truss. Now, right up above me, this happens to be OSB, which is engineered. Now, important thing, not every situation requires there be clips on the roof deck. However, really solid, good builders will be sure that this little tiny piece of hardware is put on even if it's not required. And we'll insert a picture here of what a clip looks like. It's this smallest little thing, but it's one way that you can see exactly how much care is given by a builder. So I had mentioned earlier that there's sheathing on the outside of a house. Well, this is what sheathing looks like. Now, this particular sheathing is what's called a zip wall. Very, very advanced system, waterproofing and support built in together. The sheathing on the house keeps the house from rocking side to side. If you've ever built something that's like a square, if you don't put some kind of support, it'll rock side to side. The sheathing, very important to keep that from happening in a house. That is sometimes called racking, and racking is very bad. That will make the house fall down. Now, not all houses have zip systems on them. Sometimes it'll be a piece of OSB or a piece of plywood, and then it will have a wrap on the outside. We've all driven past a house that's had white or green wrap on the outside of it. Other systems, we'll do a whole video about the exterior systems on a house and the waterproofing that goes into it and making sure that you can make good choices. Now you're looking at a roof. Ha, surprise. So the parts of a roof are the shingles, which is the black part that you're seeing. Underneath of that shingle is a waterproof material. And then up in the corner there, which we'll edit in and zoom in on, that's called flashing. Okay, so the part of the truss that actually creates the slope is called a rafter. Now here on the exterior, the part that sticks out and creates an eave, that is called a rafter tail. On the outside of the rafter tails, that's called a subfascia. That's where it'll get covered with either aluminum or it'll get painted with pure fascia, and then the gutter is attached to that. So I want to thank you much for watching this video. We've covered the major items in the framing of a house. Now we're going to do other videos about framing as well. Be sure to check those out on the channel. Now just be aware, we've covered the major items as it pertains to framing. There are other specialized techniques, specialized items that might be specific to your build, but we covered a lot of the major ones here. So before I close out here, I want to give a huge shout out to the folks from AR Homes in Columbus. This job site is absolutely pristine. We've been able to shoot this entire video here without doing a lot of cleanup behind the scenes and those kind of things. This place is gorgeous. They've really taken care of the site. So I hope you liked this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.